So, let's talk about Africa. When you hear that word, what pops into your head? For a lot of people, it's a single image. Maybe it's a vast savanna with a lonely acacia tree. Or maybe it's images of poverty, war, and suffering. It's a simple, easy-to-digest picture. The problem is, it's completely wrong. Africa isn't one picture. It's a giant, sprawling, beautiful, complicated, and incredibly diverse continent. It's not a country. It's 54 different countries, each with its own cultures, languages, and stories. Thinking of Africa as one thing is like looking at a massive buffet with thousands of dishes and just calling it food. You're missing all the good stuff. This single story didn't just appear out of nowhere. It has deep roots, going way back to the colonial era. European powers arrived and needed a good reason to justify what they were doing, which was, let's be honest, not great. So they created a narrative. They painted Africa as the dark continent, a wild and savage place that needed saving. This story made them look like heroes instead of people taking things that didn't belong to them. It was a brilliant marketing campaign, and it was so effective that parts of it are still stuck in people's minds today, hundreds of years later. It's like a terrible song that gets stuck in your head for generations. This old colonial story was passed down through books, maps, and lessons taught in schools far away from Africa. It created a foundation of misunderstanding that was built to last. The idea was to present a continent that was backward, unchanging, and helpless. This made it easier for the rest of the world to ignore the complexities and achievements of African societies. It was a narrative of control, one that put a filter on reality. It's a classic trick. If you control the story, you control how people see the world, and you can make yourself the main character even when you're not. The result is that for centuries the world has been looking at Africa through a distorted lens. It's a lens that magnifies problems and shrinks successes. It's a lens that flattens a billion people into a single, sad stereotype. Imagine if the only thing anyone knew about America was from watching reality TV shows about fighting housewives. You'd think the whole country was just drama and chaos. That's what has happened to Africa, but on a much larger scale. The world was given a script, and it's time we all realized that the script was a work of fiction, and not a very good one at that. Now, you might think, okay, that was history. We're more enlightened now. But are we? Let's look at the modern storyteller, the international media. If you watch the news, you'll notice a pattern. When they talk about Africa, the headlines are almost always about the 4Ds disease, death, despair, and dictators. The news cycle loves a crisis. A story about a new tech hub in Lagos or a successful election in Botswana just doesn't get the same clicks as a story about conflict or famine. This isn't necessarily a grand conspiracy. It's just that bad news sells, and Africa has been typecast in the role of the troubled character. This focus on the negative is relentless, and it creates a completely skewed picture. A study by Africa No Filter found that news coverage about elections on the continent is overwhelmingly negative. For Kenya's election, for example, a staggering 88% of the articles were negative, focusing on potential violence or corruption. Compare that to Malaysia, where only 48% of the coverage was negative. It's like the media has a special disaster filter that it only switches on for Africa. This reinforces the old colonial idea that the continent is unstable and incapable of governing itself, ignoring all the evidence to the contrary. A huge part of the problem is the lack of African voices in the global newsroom. For a long time, the stories about Africa were not told by Africans. They were told by foreign correspondents who would fly in, find the story that fit the stereotype they already had in their heads, and then fly out. They often lacked the local context, the language, and the deep understanding needed to tell the full story. When you don't let people tell their own stories, you get a version that is filtered through someone else's biases. It's like asking your neighbor to write your biography. They might get some facts right, but they'll miss the heart of it. This system creates a vicious cycle. Negative news shapes international perception. That perception influences policy and investment. And the lack of positive stories means there's nothing to counter the narrative. The media's incentives often favor drama over nuance, and a continent of 1.4 billion people gets reduced to a few familiar, depressing tropes. It's lazy storytelling, and it's incredibly damaging. We're getting a highlight reel of the worst moments, while the feature-length film of daily life, innovation, and progress is left on the cutting room floor, completely unwatched by the rest of the world. Now, these stereotypes aren't just hurtful words or bad vibes. They have real, tangible, and very expensive consequences. Think about it like a credit score for an entire continent. Because of this persistent negative narrative, African nations are often seen as riskier investments than they actually are. This perception isn't based on data alone, it's based on a feeling, a bias that has been built up over years of one-sided stories. This bias has a name: the prejudice premium. It's an invisible tax that African countries have to pay simply because of their address. This prejudice premium is costing the continent billions. A report from October 2024 calculated that this bias costs African countries up to £3.2 billion or $4.2 billion every single year. This isn't monopoly money. It's real cash paid in higher interest rates on loans. That's money that could be used for other things, vital things. That amount could pay for the education of 12 million children. It could provide clean water to 2/3 of the population of Nigeria. Instead, it's being used to pay for a bad reputation that the continent didn't create and doesn't deserve. The economic damage goes beyond loans. It affects trade, tourism, and foreign investment. If your only image of a place is negative, are you going to book a vacation there? Are you going to invest your company's money in a new factory there? Probably not. You'll go somewhere that feels safer, even if that feeling is based on flawed information. This holds back economic growth and punishes ordinary people who are just trying to build businesses, create jobs, and improve their communities. The stereotype becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You say a place is poor and unstable, so you don't invest, which makes it harder for it to become prosperous and stable. This is why having a fair global financial system is so important. Right now, the major credit rating agencies that decide these interest rates are located outside of Africa. They are influenced by the same biased media narratives as everyone else. In response, the African Union is planning to launch its own Africa Credit Rating Agency in 2025 to offer assessments that are better informed by local realities. Even the head of the IMF, Kristalina Georgieva, said in 2024 that Africa needs more of a say in these global institutions. It's a simple demand for fairness. Let the people who actually live there have a hand in writing their own financial story. The good news is, the story is changing. And it's changing because Africans are picking up the pen and the camera and the microphone and telling their own stories. For too long, the narrative was controlled by outsiders. Now, a powerful movement is underway to reclaim it. You can see it in the explosive growth of Nollywood, Nigeria's film industry, which is now one of the largest in the world. It's telling stories for Africans, by Africans, and the world is starting to watch. Netflix is full of amazing shows like Blood and Water from South Africa, showing a side of the continent that is modern, complex, and relatable to anyone. This creative takeover is happening everywhere. Photography collectives like Everyday Africa use social media to show the beauty and normality of daily life, directly challenging the dramatic stereotypes. They show kids playing football, people commuting to work, friends laughing in a cafe, the simple human moments that get left out of the news. African creators are also using new technology, including digital platforms and even AI, to produce and share their content with a global audience. The United Nations is supporting these efforts, helping to train young people in digital storytelling so their voices can shape the future narrative. But it's not just about art and media. There are practical steps being taken to fight the bias. Recognizing that bad reporting is part of the problem, organizations like Africa No Filter have created guides for journalists on how to cover elections fairly and accurately. On the economic front, countries are getting creative. Rwanda's Visit Rwanda campaign, which partnered with major European football clubs, is a genius move. It puts a positive, aspirational message in front of millions of people every week, changing perceptions one football match at a time. It's about branding the reality, not the stereotype. So, what can everyone else do? It's actually pretty simple. Be a conscious consumer of media. When you see a story about Africa, ask yourself, who is telling this story? What might they be leaving out? Actively seek out African voices. Follow African writers, filmmakers, and journalists on social media. Watch their movies, read their books, and listen to their music. Support businesses and tourism that benefit local communities directly. It's about being curious and open-minded enough to look past the old tired story and discover the vibrant, diverse, and powerful reality of the continent for yourself. The script is being rewritten. It's time we all started paying attention to the new story.